Hi everyone, this is Joyce Pellino Crane, News Director at Westford Cat, and I am here today with attorney Paul Alphen, who is representing Ebby Masaladon and Ebby's company, Westford Gateway LLC.
Correct.
And as many residents in Westford know, Ebby is the owner of the 9 acres at 66 Boston Road, better known as Drew Gardens. And Paul has recently helped a group of citizens file a citizens petition for the upcoming annual town meeting, and he's here today to tell us why. So Paul, you filed actually 2 petitions, one that would amend one of the agricultural preservation restrictions, and one that would seek permission for Ebby to have an alcohol license if he were able to build the restaurant on the property. So let's back up the tape a little bit and give us some background on what has been going on with that property. What does Ebby want to do there?
Thank you, Joyce. I got involved representing Ebby right before the last town meeting in April, the annual town meeting last year. And leading up to that, he agreed to purchase the property based upon a unanimous agreement with the Board of Selectmen that the Board of Selectmen would support his proposal for a restaurant and a function hall on the property. And at that time, the proposal was a building footprint that was about 16,500 square feet of building footprint. And he was sincere about his objectives, continues to be sincere about his objectives to put a first-class operation onto the property. As everyone knows, the property has been in disrepair for quite a while. I think we've had a couple of owners and at least 3 operators who haven't been able to make that property work. There's a lot that we don't know about the product mix that was sold from the site, and how much was from agriculture on the site and how much was brought in from outside. But generally, it's pretty clear that nobody's been able to make any money on the site. So Ebby was optimistic about purchasing the property based upon the support of the Board of Selectmen, that they would go to town meeting, they would support him in an attempt to amend the restriction that applies in the property that prevents the property from being used for any other purpose other than agriculture and for a country store. There's no definition in the agreement of what a country store is and what can be sold in there, but nevertheless, it's a country store. As we know, and as was reported in your online article, the article was defeated by a few votes.
It was 101 to 106.
At the town meeting was that March or April?
It was April.
It was April. And much of the objection was that the proposal was too large. And so going through the summer, working with the Drew Farm Task Force, meeting with the Board of Selectmen, the project got smaller and smaller as we went through the process.
Well, let's explain that what Ebby is seeking to do is to build a farm-to-table restaurant with parking on the property. But in the late 1990s, that property had been assigned 3 agricultural restrictions of 3 acres each. It's 9 acres in total. Each restriction was of about 3 acres each. And the APRs, as they're known, were in perpetuity. That was the language in the documents. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So there's a group of people in town that support Ebby's proposal to build the restaurant, and there's a group of people in town who oppose it and want the land to remain undeveloped. And so that's where so out of that has come the latest development, which are these 2 citizens petitions. Can you explain to Westford residents why you filed citizens petitions?
Yes. Ebby has been working on the project during the course of the fall and the winter. We were on the warrant for the fall town meeting, but we withdrew from the fall town meeting because the the town just wasn't ready for the proposal at that time. Some questions had come up regarding what was the proper procedure for amending an APR, can you amend an APR, and things like that. So one of the first things that Debbie did was to seek an outside opinion from who I believe is the state's foremost authority on the matter, Attorney Greg McGregor, to try to get a definitive answer on what it took to amend an APR. Meanwhile, he started to clean up the site. He brought goats onto the property based upon an article we had read about the benefits of bringing goats onto the property as you try to restore the property. And coincidentally, goats and other livestock and chickens are an allowed agricultural use, so we had no problem bringing the goats on the property. He's removed a great deal of refuse from the property. He took down the dilapidated greenhouses. He's brought loam onto the property. He started to improve the land there, and when the weather gets better, he'll spread the loam and that sort of stuff. But while he was doing that, we were waiting for the legal opinion. After the holidays, we were expecting the legal opinion, but checking the schedule for town meeting, we saw that the warrant was going to close. And so I submitted a request to the Board of Selectmen that they place 2 articles on the warrant. One, to proceed with an amendment to the APR that will allow a much smaller restaurant without a function room. Matter of fact, the proposed footprint is now less than 1/2 the size of the one that was proposed last spring.
So it's just over 8,000 square feet?
Just over 8,000 square foot building footprint, no more function room. And it wouldn't be any good to have a restaurant without a full liquor license. So we also proposed that the selectmen place on the warrant an article to seek permission from the legislature to have an additional liquor license in town.
And all this, the building, the parking area, and I assume the septic system as well, would all be on one 3-acre area of the land. So it would only, the amendment is proposed for APR number 3 only.
Correct. The rest of the property would be actively used for agricultural purposes. We had previously submitted to the Board of Selectmen a proposed definition of farm to table, indicating what percentage of the food sold at the restaurant would be grown on site, what percentage would be from farmers in Massachusetts, what percentage would be from farmers in other parts of New England.
And who would farm the land?
Ebby has a relationship with some other regional, local farmers, and he would engage them to farm the land. I don't think that Ebby himself would be hoeing, but he has relationship with other farmers in the area.
So let's talk a little bit about the history of Drew Gardens. It started somewhere. I don't know the original history. The land, the 9 acres, was originally owned by someone with the last name of Drew, I believe. Do you know anything?
Probably Ben Drew. I'm
believe it was.
Particularly have all the details of that, but at one point Keith Boney was operating it as part of a larger farmland that he has. And then sometime in the town meeting warrants with me, but sometime in the 90s, when development was hot in town, there were developers that were looking at purchasing that property for purposes of building homes. And at that time, there were just so many homes being built in town by my clients and others that the town had tried to come up with a way to protect that property from being developed. And that's when it was defined as the gateway to Westford. So town meeting authorized the Board of Selectmen to enter into agreements with Mr. Boney to purchase the development rights of the property so that it could not be used for the construction of residential dwellings or other things. It was to be restricted to agricultural uses, but parcel 3, APR 3, the one we're talking about today, could continue to be used for the country store, and that nothing else could be built there without the approval of the selectmen and some other criteria. The town bought the development rights. Mr. Boney operated it. I think that if you interviewed Mr. Boney, he'd tell you that, he didn't make sufficient funds to make a go of it at that property based upon items that were grown on site. He placed the property on the market. I believe even at that time, yes, the town had a right of first refusal. The town did not purchase the property. It went to the next owner.
Who was Tom Goddard of, I believe he's from North Reading.
I believe so too. And he brought in, he did a bunch of things. I mean, he first eliminated that driveway that we all used to use when we pulled in there in order to get a last minute bouquet of flowers on our way home, or a knickknack or something that we needed. And he put that new parking lot over on the north side of the lot and closed off the convenient U-shaped parking lot off of Boston Road. But then he also brought in a variety of agricultural products, and I'm saying this based upon what I saw. Is I drive by there at least 2 times a day, and he was bringing in bags of Bach mulch and a variety of other things, and it was sort of different. It was much different than what Keith Boney was doing. And then for a period of time, that didn't seem to do all that well, and he apparently allowed somebody else to operate some business there, but that didn't last too long. And then about the same time, he brought all kinds of compost onto the property.
There were mountains of compost sometime around 2014.
Yep.
I do remember seeing them.
Yep.
Until the town issued a cease and desist order.
Yep.
With, I believe it was Lowell Superior Court?
Yeah, I think it went to Lowell Superior Court, and ultimately after a couple of orders not complied with, ultimately most of the compost was removed from the site. There was still some left after that, but most of it was removed, and then Mr. Goddard put the property on the market again.
And that's where Ebby eventually stepped in and purchased the property for about $650,000 last February?
Yeah, he closed on, he took title in it in February. One of the conditions of the agreement that he had with the selectmen, and I think the agreement with the selectmen was signed in December or January, either December of 2015 or January 2016, and the selectmen said that they would support an article to amend the APR to allow the restaurant and function hall if he closed on the property within a set period of time. And he took title to the property within that set period of time. So he fulfilled his side of the bargain.
So now he has eliminated the banquet hall, though,
well,
in his newest plans.
Over the course of the winter, listening to some of the comment and suggestions from people in the community, he's gone forward with a kinder, gentler proposal, which is a restaurant. There's a bar area, there's a raw bar area, but no function hall.
Do you know how many seats that restaurant would have?
I didn't count them.
Yeah.
I didn't count them. That's a good question. We should figure
And
that
parking spaces are not.
We haven't, there isn't a site plan prepared yet, because we're trying to get some feedback from this. So we submitted the proposal to the selectmen to place these 2 articles on the warrant. We just saw that the time crunch was such that it didn't look like the selectmen were going to have time to vet, that's the term people are using these days, to vet these articles and put them on the warrant independently. So I suggested to Ebby that he collect some signatures and put them on the warrant so the selectmen wouldn't have to debate whether to put them on the warrant or not. So they ended up on the warrant by petition.
So based on this letter from Attorney McGregor, who says in his letter, he says that selectmen are the final authority, and that at least the way I read it, it indicates that the question doesn't have to go before town meeting.
Correct.
What do you make of this, and what will become of the citizens' petitions?
Well, I still think that inasmuch as when Ebby reached an agreement with the selectmen last year, that the selectmen wished any amendment to an APR to first be approved by at least a majority vote of town meeting, that I expect that the selectmen would not independently amend the APR. Notwithstanding that they had the legal authority to do it, I would expect that since it was town meeting who in 1992 directed them to enter into negotiations with the then landowner and work out the terms of an APR, I would expect that the Board of Selectmen would seek some approval from town meeting before they amended the document again. So I expect that that at the March 25th annual town meeting, that those articles will be acted upon, and if acted upon affirmatively, that then we would enter into a new agreement with the Board of Selectmen.
And what if they are voted down again? Then what?
I know that Abby is very committed to this idea of this first-class restaurant, and I would bet that he'd come up with another plan. He is, I've asked him, what if, and the answer is consistent. Nope. We have to find a way to bring people together and get them to appreciate my vision and how this, would be a first-class operation, and as well, it would restore the farmland. It would not only look good, it would taste good.
And it does seem like it would be a very elegant restaurant. However, there are people in town that are very opposed to this and don't want to see that land developed. And that includes at least 3 former selectmen who were active at the time that the APRs were put into place, or have been land preservationists themselves. So we do have to take into consideration their argument. And what do you say to the idea of developing land that had been put into under a restriction forever?
And this is part of the discussion that had occurred through much of the summer with the Drew Garden Task Force, a group, a subset of well, there was, I think, one member of the Board of Selectmen and some other people who had been on the Drew Garden Task Force at some period of time, and it was expanded to include some abutters. And that
it's a 13-member committee, and on it sits Keith Boney, who was a former owner of Drew Gardens.
And Keith has made no secret that it's not financially viable to operate a farm stand on the property. And some of the discussions that have been held at the Drew Farm Task Force meeting are discussions with other farmers to see if, what they thought the financial viability would be of the property, and they just said that scenario just isn't viable. I knew there was something else that came out of this process. Not only did Keith Boney say that it wasn't financially viable, and others say it wasn't financially viable, we asked for examples of similar situations where parties had used land for similar situations and they were financially viable. And none were forthcoming.
Mm-hmm.
There have been situations where people have been granted the right to use land for $0 that apparently it had been worthwhile, but not in a situation where somebody had paid $650,000 for a piece of property.
Oh, I see. Yeah, so it's not so much the size of the land, or maybe that's also an issue, that it's a small plot of land for farming.
Right. If we could operate the property as a restaurant without obtaining any approval, because there are certain restaurants that are considered to be agricultural uses, but it's driven by what percentage of the product sold at harvest time came from the property. And so basically, if we were going to serve primarily a vegetarian menu, we could open tomorrow. But for a wider menu, we need an amendment to the APR to allow a restaurant to sell other goods, locally sourced, nevertheless, from other local farmers and some farmers in Vermont, but nevertheless, to have a wider menu, we need the amendment to the APR.
I don't understand. I'm not quite following you. You need an amendment to the APR to sell meat products?
We need an amendment to the APR to do something other than strictly agricultural use as defined in the APR. If we were just operating a restaurant where we were selling products that principally came from the site, that would be considered to be agriculture, period. We could operate the restaurant. We need an amendment to the APR because part of our restaurant operation does not meet the definition of an agricultural use, because we'd be operating a restaurant with a wider menu.
I see. That's very understandable.
Mm-hmm.
So we only have a few minutes left, but before we end, I wanted to ask you about your history with Westford and what brought you here. You were just telling me off camera something I never knew.
Well, in 1981, the town went through a very difficult period where the northeast corner of the town had been proposed for a hazardous waste treatment facility. And town meeting reached an agreement with the property owner to prevent the hazardous waste treatment facility from being brought in. Soon after that, the town administrator, who was called an executive secretary, unfortunately passed away. And the town advertised for a statutory executive secretary, the first executive secretary that duties would be defined by state statute. And I was working for the Department of the State Auditor at the time, and I was going to law school nights. I had my master's in public administration. I answered the ad. And Dick Emmett at that time was the chairman of the Board of Selectmen. Ron Johnson was on the Board of Selectmen. And I interviewed for the position. I'd grown up in Wayland, just a couple of towns away. I knew where Kimball's farm was, and I was fortunate enough to get the job as the first statutory executive secretary. After I graduated from law school, I ended up practicing law in Westford. I've never left. We live in Westford. Kids went to school in Westford. And when I left, I talked Bob Alphen into applying for the job. Bob became the second executive secretary and the first town manager. And I love the work that Bob does. He's in Framingham right now. He's a very good friend of mine, and I really admire the work that he does. And certainly the job has evolved significantly over the years. It's a much more complicated job than it was in 1982 when I came to town.
I wonder what the budget was back then.
It was nickels. It was compared to what it is now. It's nickels. And if we have a minute, one of my fondest memories of working for town, notwithstanding that I enjoyed every day of it, I was the first person to bring computers inside the town hall. I literally picked them off the truck, brought them into the town hall, opened them up, plugged them in, and said to the good folks that work at town meeting, meet your computer. You're now going to have to submit your budget on computer. And I'm sure that wasn't a very popular thing to do, because it was such a new idea for a lot of folks. Some people, loved it, but I don't think it was universally appreciated. But it had to start someplace.
And you started it. Well, that's a great claim to fame, Paul. I wanted to thank you for coming in today and talking to us. And just to correct the record, I said that you were representing Ebby Masaladon. I think you're representing his company, Westford Gateway, LLC.
Right.
Which Ebby owns.
Correct.
So I just wanted to correct the record on that. And I wanted to say thank you again for coming in, and best of luck with your endeavors. And for Westford Community Access Television, this is Joyce Pellino Crane.